Hello everyone. So I've been given 15 minutes to speak, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my entrepreneurial journey. But I'm the type of person who goes to events and likes to come away with some learning and something I can apply myself. So I'm aware that I'm speaking to some entrepreneurs. I'm speaking to some people who might have an entrepreneurial idea, but I'm also speaking to a lot of you who are not entrepreneurs. So I wanted to make this as useful as possible for everyone. So I'm going to bring up my slides. Let's see, kick this off. Hopefully you can all see that. Right, so just to give you kind of a little bit of a brief rundown as to my kind of crazy career. So as Pinky said, I'm a dating expert. I was working in banking, and I accidentally wrote a blog that went viral. The idea was never to write a blog. It started as a Facebook status suggesting I went on 30 blind dates before my 30th birthday, and my friends asked me to turn it into a blog, which I think 2,000 people read the first night I wrote it. And suddenly I had to go on all these dates and write this blog. But that kind of was the springboard that a lot of my career since then has kind of bounced off. So I was picked up very quickly by The Guardian. I wrote a review of one of their events, which is actually quite negative. And rather than tell me to take it down, they actually said, do you know what, we've never run an event like this before. We really appreciated your criticism in the blog. Will you come in and consult for us? So I started working at The Guardian part-time, still working in banking. And then Time Out approached me and asked me to design a dating website for them. So I ended up moving full-time to Time Out eventually. And in amongst all of that, The Guardian asked me to start first off teaching some masterclasses in dating, and then that evolved into masterclasses in blogging and entrepreneurship and marketing, and I still teach those classes 8 years later. I actually taught one last night. In 2014, I founded the UK Dating Awards, and that was actually an idea I had off the back of the blog. A lot of people who were reading the blog kept emailing me and asking me, which dating app should we be using? Which dating experts would you recommend? And I was like, well, I can give you my opinion as a 20-something straight female, or I can try and make this more democratic and actually get more opinions here. So I launched the UK Awards in 2014, and they went really well, and I ended up taking them to Europe, to Amsterdam, and to the States, to New York a few years later. And amongst that, because dating is such a small space, I quite quickly became one of the leading voices in the dating industry, partly because a lot of people who were writing about dating weren't putting their names and faces to it. And so as a result, I've appeared on some quite cool TV and radio shows over the years, including being a judge on the final of The Apprentice, where I pulled some amazing faces, and they didn't show me speaking, but you could see me pulling some very critical faces of the idea that didn't win, funnily enough, in the end. I have written a couple of books, including The Female Entrepreneur. I'm quite passionate about encouraging other women to start their own businesses, and I'll talk about in a second some of the things I've experienced in my career which have made me want to encourage more women to start their own businesses. In 2018, as Pinky touched on, I co-founded Lumen, which is a dating app for over 50s. It was the fastest growing dating app of 2019. And the reason that I actually ended up founding that was I was actually approached, I was headhunted again. The investor had agreed a £3.5 million seed investment to my co-founder, but on the terms that he found a co-founder who understood dating and could do the marketing side of things. So I was CMO and co-founder at Lumen for 2 years before we actually sold last year. So I exited about a month before lockdown and should be on a beach somewhere, but I'm not. I'm back home. So I've spent the last year consulting for various startups, and I find that really interesting actually, because I work with a lot of businesses of different sizes. I work with a NASDAQ floated dating company too, so I can see all sides of business and kind of have learned a lot along the way. But the idea today, I thought what I would do today is share 5 moments from my career and my life which I've been able to learn from, and which kind of stand out and hopefully will help inspire you guys, regardless of whether you are entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, or just come along to network and meet some other incredible women. Okay, so this is my first, that's me on stage at the Dating Awards, one of the London Dating Awards. And the reason I brought this moment as the first one I wanted to talk about was I can remember having that kind of lightning bolt idea for this business. And And I can also remember the first thought that ran through my head when I had this idea for this company. And it in some ways embarrassed that this was the knee-jerk reaction of my brain, but I think it says a lot about the world we live in. Now, I am a massive feminist. If you saw the painting behind me on the wall, it's Ruth Ginsburg. I went to an all-girls school where from the age of 11, I was taught to compete with everyone, right? Regardless of whether they were a boy or a girl. And the aim was you are going to be the best of the best. And that didn't matter on anyone's gender. It was simply get as many A stars as you can, and, you know, kind of annihilate the competition in the process. And I never once thought about whether I was competing against boys or girls until I got to university and I studied at Cambridge, where I suddenly started noticing a difference between the way that women who spoke out were being treated to men who had loud opinions too. Anyway, so I had this idea for this business. I realized there was a gap in the market, and the first thing my brain said was, oh yeah, but you're a girl. Women don't start businesses. And I admit that, right? It's not what I believed I felt, but that was what my brain said. As soon as I had that idea, that was the doubt that crept into my mind. And that is a doubt that had been clearly, I kind of absorbed from the world around me, and the fact that I didn't at 29 know any other female founders of businesses. The only people I knew who were my age who were setting up businesses were men. And so that's something that, well, clearly women can start businesses, and I'm glad I didn't listen to that niggling doubt, and I carried on and started my business. And since then, I think this is now, I'm probably on my 5th or 6th business, because I've had limited companies for consultancy as well as standalone businesses. Yeah, and I'm so glad I didn't listen to that doubt. But I wanted to raise that because I think that's a doubt that a lot of people have in their head, and it's one that we need to quash, and one that we need to make sure that women who are younger than us don't ever have that doubt, don't even have reason to have that doubt, because they can see so many role models and so many inspiring women who mean that doubt doesn't even exist. So the second moment I wanted to share with you, there's some classic pictures from my gap years. So I have had quite an unorthodox career, and part of the reason for that, I think, is I lost both my parents when I was a teenager. They both died of cancer. So I definitely have this kind of carpe diem, seize the day approach to life. I try and fill my life with as many experiences as possible, almost live as many lives as I can. And that's kind of on this screen in some ways. So after I studied law at Cambridge, I did a master's in journalism at Westminster, and I wanted to become a Blue Peter presenter. So I went traveling around the world, and I decided to film my Blue Peter show reel and do all these cool things. And I landed up in Whistler, which is a ski resort in Canada, where I ended up actually living for 2 years. And I trained as a ski instructor and a snowboard instructor. I nannied to sort of make ends meet. And so there's me looking very, I don't know if it looks like I've got stubble, and that's my goggle tan from 2 seasons in. I'm quite proud of that tan, actually. That shows you how much time I was getting to ski. But yeah, so I was living in Worcester, and this is the reason I'm mentioning this is when I came up with the idea for the dating awards, I remember thinking, well, I've never done anything like this before, you know. But actually, in hindsight, I was an entrepreneur long before that, because in 2010, so a good 4 years beforehand, while I was living in Whistler, I noticed a gap in the market, and I decided to act on it kind of on a whim. Now, I did my first ski season in Whistler. Then in the summer between the 2 ski seasons, I flew down to Honduras to an island called Utila, which is a very famous scuba diving island. And I had done my rescue diver there, and I loved it. And I thought, well, I'll go back and become a dive master. So I think I was there for 2 or 3 months, and I basically worked on a boat day in, day out, helping the dive instructors. And that's how it's kind of like an apprenticeship. And one of the things that as a dive master I was allowed to do was also to train as a first aid instructor. Now, I had some experience teaching first aid. I used to be a brownie leader. My kind of first aid had been something I'd known since I was a brownie myself. But basically I realised kind of, and it must have just come to me one evening when I was on the island, that back in Whistler, Whistler, you know, the main industry, which is probably suffering at the moment, is tourism. So you've got lots of bars, lots of hotels, and any of those jobs required a professional first aid qualification. You had to have first aid at work. And in order for the companies to train all their staff up, they had to bus them to Vancouver, where they would spend 2 nights. So they pay for accommodation, they pay for their courses and all their food. And it was costing these companies a lot of money to train their staff up in first aid. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to spend £200. I'm going to do my first aid instructor qualification, and let's see if when I go back to Whistler, anyone wants me to train them up. And so I invested in a resuscitation doll and some bandages and all the bits and bobs I needed to teach first aid. And I made an absolute killing. My second season in Whistler, I created this job that just worked on my own terms, where I could ski during the day, and then in the evenings I'd go into bars and I would teach the staff how to do first aid. I would qualify them. I think the registration process of qualifying them cost me £12, so I could basically name a price to teach a whole room full of people first aid to that business, and I could still undercut the costs of them going to Vancouver. But I never even thought of myself as an entrepreneur, and I never thought of that as an entrepreneurial idea. And it was only years later when I look back and I was like, oh my God, I actually did really run a business there. What's quite funny is I still get emails to this day asking if I teach first aid courses in Whistler, which sadly I don't anymore. It would be a far better place to be locked down, I think. Okay, so my third moment of realization. So I am not a natural athlete, and I say that I'm a size 12, I'm quite heavy, I'm not a natural ultra marathon runner or marathon runner. I just really love challenges, and I like having a challenge in my mind, setting myself that challenge and then working towards it. And so two of those challenges over the years have been an Man Triathlon, which is something I talked about doing for years, and then Marathon des Sables. And the reason I wanted to share these two with you is because, first off, Marathon des Sables was something I saw a man I went to uni do, and I remember thinking, oh my God, this just seems insane. This is like the pinnacle. How could anyone ever achieve this? And I can remember how I saw it before I had no awareness of it, and how high a mountain that seemed to climb. And now having done it, and it was actually a lot easier than I expected, the way I view it in hindsight is so different. So it's like looking at a mountain and thinking, oh my God, I've climbed that mountain, and then looking back and realizing it was a smaller hill than you thought. That kind of idea, because I think that's something to definitely apply to business. Sometimes things can seem really looming and scary, and then when you break them down and have more knowledge about them, you realize like your perceptions change of it. And the other reason I wanted to highlight these two things is I would have never thought of doing Marathon des Sables if I hadn't been able to complete an Ironman. And yet I had that experience with the Ironman where I trained for it and I properly prepared for it, and I finished it 2 hours quicker than I thought I was going to finish it. Granted, if you see the time on the finish line, it still took me 14 hours, but that was 2 hours quicker than I was hoping. And so having done that, I then looked to the next challenge. And I think that this is the way that I've really looked at my career, not just sort of my sporting kind of sideline, my sporting hobbies, is that work towards a challenge. And once you've achieved that challenge and you realize you're capable of it, then you start setting your goals higher and higher and higher. And I love that as a way to live life. I think, again, that kind of appeals to the side of me that is all about seizing the day. So just to show you some of the stuff I've done over the years, a couple of the crazy ultra marathons I've done. An Ironman, for those of you that don't know, it's a 2.5 mile swim, 112 mile cycle ride, and then you finish with a full marathon, which is a bit bonkers. And particularly bonkers when I walked some sections of it because I've been exercising for over 10 hours by that point. And then you've got these supporters trying to be really supportive, shouting at you, come on, you don't have to walk, you can run. And you're like, no, this is all part of my plan. Thank you very much. Just leave me to it. I'm okay. But yeah, so my next, these are pictures from an ultramarathon I did in Greenland, which was over a glacier. I don't know if you can see in the pictures, I've actually got ice crampons on my feet. I'm running with ice crampons on. It was very surreal, and it was, sub-zero, which is why I look slightly miserable in the first picture, which is why I included 2 pictures, because I thought I looked a bit happier the second day. But yeah, so the reasons I've included this is actually that there have definitely been times when I have applied sporting thinking to business and to entrepreneurship. And one of the moments that stands out in my mind was talking to my co-founder when I was at Lumen, and him really being daunted by stuff and seeing what we were trying to achieve as something so big and unachievable. And I never had those fears because I think I'd learned through ultramarathons that it really is just a case of not looking miles ahead to the finish line, but keeping yourself where your body is, which is an important point, particularly in an Ironman, particularly when you're changing from swimming to cycling to running. The key is, what am I doing at the moment? How can I make this as easy as possible? And how can I just get through this moment step by step by step? And I think whatever you do business-wise, that's a nice lesson to have. This is also a nice lesson that I learned from a very experienced ultramarathoner who always sets herself 3 goals for any race. She has her ideal goal, what the dream would be. She has goal number 2, which is, okay, it's a good day, what would I love to achieve? And then she always has her third goal, which is, as a bare minimum, what do I want to do? Which normally in race is just finish. But I think again, this is something that this is a principle you can apply to any other area of business. And then my 5th point is realizing that I'm more than capable. So at Lumen, we were in a very fortunate position to have a lot of funding, but also we still needed to have startup mentality and to do things as leanly as possible. And one of the ways that I've always done that, having learned this through running a company like the Dating Awards, where every pound that I spent came directly out of my own pocket, is to work out which bits you can do for yourself and then outsource the bits that you don't enjoy doing or that you're not good at. So I've always tried to test myself and see what I'm capable of. Now, this comedy Too Bad was our first ad campaign, one of our most successful, actually. I came up with this. This was me. This is kind of like a beer mat scribbling of mine. And my approach to our marketing as CMO was, okay, which bits let's test it and see if I do something, if my idea works, we'll carry on. If my ideas don't work, then we'll employ an agency. And quite fortunately, a lot of my ideas did work. So just to show you some of the fun that we had while I was at Lumen, this became like international news. Sexy Santa. And that was a photo shoot that I did. I completely organized from end to end myself. I didn't hire an agency for the photo shoot or anything like that. Yeah, he literally made national, and I mean, this was 3 Christmases ago, and he still pops up in memes 2 years later, I've noticed, at Christmas time, our Sexy Santa. There was this one, which again was just an idea I had before bedtime, this idea that, you know, that off the back of the coverage that Sexy Santa got, you shouldn't have to get naked as an over 50 to be seen, but a lot of over 50s did feel invisible. So that was what this campaign was designed to target. And then these guys who were my incredible over 50s who had just achieved such incredible things. Each one had an incredible story. Probably my favorite, she sadly died at the end of last year, was Dilys Price, OBE, 87. She stopped skydiving at 85. And she only stopped because as an acrobatic skydiver, she was struggling to get out of the rolls. So just, I mean, like, if you're ever feeling a bit uninspired, just Google some of these people. But yeah, so these are some of the ad campaigns that I created, which in turn not only inspired me, but made me realize that, yeah, actually, do you know what? This is something I can do. So that is my very short presentation. Sorry if I've gone over slightly. I've got my contact details on there if anyone wants to contact me. And then if I switch back out of sharing mode, hello, just in case anyone has any questions. Look in the Q&A. Okay, I'll answer this question, then I can hand over to Lucile. Where did you get your entrepreneurial spirit from? And do you think girls-only schools are better? Okay, personally, as a governor of an all-girls school, for secondary school, I think girls' schools are amazing. I mean, I think because we didn't worry about what boys thought of us and we just could crack on, and I think girls perform academically better in all-girls schools, to my knowledge, but I loved it. Though I went to a grammar school, not a public school. When I went to a public school, it was all girls. There was a lot more bullying. That would be my personal take on that. And where did I get my entrepreneurial spirit? Do you know what? My dad was an entrepreneur, and I think it's funny because I look back and I'm so, like, you know, he died almost 20 years ago, and I see so much of myself in him, and I see all the projects that he was always had on the go, and I think that just kind of like, it's like osmosis, right? I didn't even realize how I was being inspired at the time and how he was showing me that you can just have ideas and turn them into reality. But I think, yeah, I'm designed for a life less ordinary. I think I just love this. I love creating my day to day, and I'm not very good at taking orders, particularly from men, I've noticed. Okay, so enough of me talking. It's time to hand over to our lovely second speaker. So if Lucile, if you'd like to turn your camera on and your microphone on.
Hey, Charly, thanks. Thanks for such an inspirational chat. I really enjoyed it, and you know, no Ironman on my side, but I have to say I did live in Vancouver for a semester abroad, and I did ski in Whistler, and I think that those are probably some of my best moments. It's really an amazing location, so really brought back some good memories of that for sure.
Oh, thank you, and I will hand over to you.
But hi everyone, so I'm Lucile. I'm a partner at 8 Roads, which is a venture fund backed by Fidelity. And today I wanted to maybe spend a couple of minutes around what I see in technology today, and then dive a little bit more into the woman topic and how can we see more women in tech. And Charly was such a good example of I guess great inspiration of what that looks like. But maybe a word about myself. So I'm French, as you can probably guess. I moved to London 12 years ago. Fell in tech a little bit by chance. So I started my career in investment banking in the city, pretty traditional, and I kind of discovered the technology side and entrepreneurial side of things, and slowly moved into the investment job. And I realized I really enjoyed it for a couple of reasons, because a lot of the job is around meeting people. So it's a lot of relationship building, spending time with others, which I enjoy a lot. And the other bit is you could make an impact. So obviously not as much as being an entrepreneur myself, but obviously a lot of what we do is trying to support and help the entrepreneurs in their journey. And I continue to really enjoy that and feel very fortunate. So, we're investors in businesses like Treatwell, Made.com, Kazoo, not on the high street, so you may recognize some of those names. And so a couple of things I wanted to touch upon today is, I know it's lockdown, I know it's, we're having this event in remote. I know, like, I think Pinky mentioned, like, difficult times for a lot of women, but I also think it's an incredible time for people in the, that are either entrepreneurs or in the technology space. And so I wanted to spend maybe a bit of time around, a couple of reasons why I think it's such an exciting time in this area. The first one is, and you'll probably be familiar with that, but I think we're really living unprecedented time in terms of adoption of technology, and it's quite ironical. I'm having this session on Remo because we've been trying new things, we've been trying new platforms, we've been trying new ways of doing things in a way that we've never done before. And I was reading some of the stats, and it's not only e-groceries, it's not only e-commerce. I mean, it's like complete new sectors of the economy where there's a lot of disruption coming. And I think this pandemic in many ways has accelerated the trajectory of technology adoption, and it's a great thing in general. So I'm really bullish in general around how big technology can get, and I think we're really living in that moment of complete acceleration of that, and huge opportunity for innovation and entrepreneurs. So that's the first thing. I think the other aspect is the what I call the awakening of Europe, and that's obviously including the UK. I know it can be a touchy definition these days, but in some sense, I remember when I started my career, like maybe 10 years ago, and you were doing venture capital, there was still this question, like, can Europe really build technology giants? And at that time, the common I guess knowledge was to say, like, large companies are being built in the US or in Asia, and there were a couple of good stories in Europe, like things like Skype and so on, but those were more the exception than the rule. And I think now what we see is we have I think Farfetch, which is like a 20 or 30 billion market cap business listed. We have Deliveroo that is on the way to its IPO. So there's no more question now around the ability to create technology giants out of Europe, and I find that particularly exciting. And I was reflecting on Deliveroo yesterday, and when I was preparing this, and Deliveroo was founded in 2013. So when you think about it, the business is 8 years old. So it's truly fantastic to think, like, someone creating a business in less than 8 years that is going to be worth more than 10 billion at its IPO. I think it's truly fascinating. And so maybe the last topic, and you may ask, this is Women of the Future. So, what's the role of women in that industry? And one thing you realize relatively quickly when you work in venture is that there is huge lack of diversity, and it's not only women, it's all sorts of diversity. So it's dominated by white, male, middle-aged, and that's a real shame. And I think the stats are 15% of startups have a female co-founder, which is clearly not enough. And I often get this question: how do we change that? How do we improve the stats? And my view on that is, I don't think there is necessarily a silver bullet on some of these things. But one topic I find really important, and I think Charly alluded to that as well, is I think there are different ways to be successful. And that's one topic even for myself that, it took me a while to realize is, I think sometimes we have these very preconceived ideas about what success looks like. And I find time and time again, like when we hire for one of my portfolio company, people would hire like a head of sales and have a very preconceived idea about, what a successful head of sales look like. Or again, like when you're in venture fund, like an idea of what a successful founder may look like. And the more time goes by, the more I realize there is no such thing. Like there's a lot of different paths to success. And I think it's for everyone's realization to be open-minded about those paths. And I think effectively being open to see success in different places. And even for women ourselves, I think a lot of, in the early steps of your career, you do a lot of imitation because that's how you learn, right? So you look at others and you replicate. But I think there is a moment in time where, you need to almost unlearn a little bit and say, hey, that's going to be my way of doing the job. That's going to be my way of being successful in this. Like, it doesn't have to be the same way as others. And so I would encourage everyone to, be bold and be open to those slightly unorthodox career paths. And I really liked, I think, Charly, you mentioned, like, there's no like linear careers anymore. Like there's no such thing as a perfect path to something. And I definitely see that in a lot of the successful entrepreneurs. Like it's they've tried many things. They've been bold. They've been they've taken a lot of risks. And I think there's no such thing as, hey, like you do those steps and you build your career. There is a great book actually on that topic, which I think is called The 100 Years Life, which shows that now we live in a world where, we'll probably do multiple careers and multiple things in our life. So I just wanted to end on that note, and happy to take questions if you have any. But again, feel free to also ping me on LinkedIn or in the networking afterwards.